I hope you're having a great empathy week. I hope you've managed to access some of the resources. As you can see, someone's put a love heart, which is very nice. You can use the react buttons. Yeah, keep them coming at the bottom. You can also use the chat. You can ask questions via the Q&A. And this is really a great chance for you to learn about emotionally based school avoidance. I'm sure if you're here, you may be having some problems and some issues with your own students. And this is a chance for you to ask questions directly, get a mountain of knowledge from our experts, and some ideas and tips and tricks and tools to take back into your classrooms. Delighted that this is with no isolation. I think what they're doing is phenomenal. It is Empathy Week, and there's so much talk about tech. And what we love at Empathy Week about this is that they are essentially harnessing human skills, using tech, and enabling students to actually connect better, not miss school, and be part of and feel like they still belong no matter what is going on in their life. So hello to everyone. I'm going to do something magical, which is to spotlight our guest speakers who are going to be doing a lot more speaking than me, you'll be pleased to know, and are going to be our panel. So we're going to have a bit of a panel. Please ask questions at any time. But I'm going to start with Simone. Do you want to introduce yourself before we go to Sarah and Emma? And thank you so much for being here.
You're welcome. Thank you. My name's Simone Isaacs. I currently work as a customer success manager for No Isolation in the UK. Previous to that, I have been in education for nearly 30 years, first as a primary school teacher. Then I worked in a secure unit for young offenders. Most recently, I've worked at a local authority with responsibility for a range of services within that local authority. But mainly, I was the medical education lead. I know it's probably called different things across the country, but that's what we called it in Southend. Actually, it was education access lead, but I had responsibility for that.
Amazing. Sarah, do you want to go next?
Hi, yeah, my name is Sarah Johnson. I'm a consultant working nationally and internationally on a range of different topics. I work primarily with children that are marginalised from education for one reason or another, whether or not that's because they have special educational needs, significant mental health issues, emotional-based school avoidance, and so on. I'm looking forward to next week going to Zambia to learn more about what they do in Zambia around education, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Sweden, wherever. I love finding out more what's happening. So it would be great if people contribute as well and think about what they do to support children with emotional based school avoidance. I'm also a mum of four, with my oldest, who's 15, who has quite significant needs in terms of difficulties and challenges about attending school.
Amazing, thank you. And yeah, just before we go to Emma, please do add in the chat, experiences you're having. Just please bear in mind, obviously, to anonymize things. And with that in mind, the Q&A has an anonymous function. So if you also are feeling a bit uncomfortable about asking a question or putting it in the chat, you can use the Q&A anonymously, or you can send us host and panelist messages directly as well. Emma.
Good evening. So my name is Emma Gopher, and I am a Senko and senior leader at Abbeyfield School in Northamptonshire. So my background, obviously, I had lots of lived experience in terms of neurodiversity, and that's led me into the role that I'm doing now. I've had the opportunity to work with secondary school students, but actually within my time, I've worked with a whole range of students from primary, secondary and FE, looking at obviously SEN and access arrangements. My background really is in making sure that every young person obviously has access to education, and that's whether they're in full-time or if they're using alternative means, which is obviously how we've come to be part of this today. I think the other thing that's really interesting is about neurodiversity and how we obviously move that forward. So part of what I'm doing at the moment is learning to be a dyslexia assessor. So then, of course, I can support the young people that we work with. Exciting times.
Amazing. Wow. So much expertise here. I'm going to say it again. Please do ask questions throughout if you have them. And maybe you're stuck. Maybe there's something going on at school. Again, you can ask anonymously, get some advice, get some feedback from our experts. So I'm just going to quickly start us off. Why do students miss school? There's a plethora of reasons, but let's chat. Anyone that wants to jump in, what are the issues we're seeing? Why are students missing school more than ever at the moment, actually?
Can any of us jump in? Oh, sorry.
I was going to say, from a school point of view, we're seeing a huge increase, whether it's in neurodiversity, or whether it's looking at things like medical needs. And actually, I think more and more within a mainstream setting, we're getting a high proportion of need that we then obviously have to support. Now, the education system is looking at obviously grades and outcomes, but actually, when we're looking at it, what does success look like? And I think a lot of the young people that we work with, we're more aware of the medical, we're more aware of the neurodiversity, and actually the young people are as well. And I think that's really positive in many respects, because they're trying to advocate for themselves in terms of what they need. I think there's obviously less special school places in terms of need. Of course, I know we're increasing the number, but actually when you're looking at the need across the nation, there isn't enough places. I think also in terms of schools, there's a certain expectation and a process in terms of making sure they achieve positive outcomes. And that, of course, does make it a real challenge for young people that aren't necessarily able to access, obviously, full-time education. What do we think, Sarah? Can you add to that?
Yeah, no, thank you. I think the question is quite a wide one. So I suppose I want to kind of group it into different sections. I think the first bit is understanding emotional-based school avoidance or non-attendance, that it's more than just school refusal, and actually is about distress and not defiance. And I think we have to link it to these ideas about belonging. So if a child feels unsafe, if they feel unseen or misunderstood, then you might see that they withdraw. But I also think there's clear intersectionality with children with special educational needs, anxiety, trauma, but also those children with past negative school experiences. And I think there's a continuum about children finding it difficult to be able to attend, and perhaps they feel othered, they might not see themselves represented or included. I think we have to also talk about those kind of behavioural policies that children really struggle with that might increase a child's anxiety. But also you mentioned, for example, neurodiversity, that actually children that are autistic or might have ADHD and all those sorts of things might also have increased propensity for mental health difficulties, social challenges, and so on. I think ultimately we have to ask the young people, what's difficult for you? What's challenging? What can we do differently to support you?
I think there's also more than just the medical or the neurodiversity or the special education needs. We've got children that get displaced for various, lots of different reasons. Children sometimes, if they're if they're looked after children, they may have to move out of county quite imminently, quite quickly, and they may not have a school placement in place for them there. So they're by default they're going to be missing in their education. So it's there are so many reasons why children may or may not be able to attend school, and it's all sort of like under one umbrella, like persistent absence, but it's very, very complex. And like you say, Sarah, it's about the individual child as well, isn't it? About what their experience and what their lived experience is.
And it seems, what you just said there, Simone, is so vital. It's about the individual child. But we know, teachers, we're all in education. I've been a teacher myself as well in the past. Time, stress, a million things going on. How can we help, or what are the tips and tools that we can use to kind of make those children feel emotionally safe and emotionally secure? What are the sort of things that we can do to start doing that? I'm sure schools already have these things in place, a lot of them, but what are the sort of things that you're seeing that can really make that tangible difference, and also that teachers can start to implement?
I think for me, it's about knowing the young person. You talked about it being really personalised, and actually there is obviously frameworks and structures that you can use to support people with this identified need. However, it's important to know that they're obviously co-occurring needs, and actually one size does not fit all. So one of my biggest things that I work with my team is about knowing the young person and their family. And I think it's really important to understand that. So it's regular communication. It's looking behind whatever label that they have or we're trying to give them, because it's about making sure what is going to make an impact now in terms of that connection. So if you've got that connection, then that can obviously grow. And then it's about making like almost like phased steps into whatever the goal happens to be, and it's celebrating at every level. And it's hard at schools because in some respects, because you would have like full-time attendance. Well, that's brilliant for some people, but actually if someone isn't been able to attend school for all different reasons, it's getting them through the door. It's then celebrating the fact that they've then been able to do the afternoon. It's then the fact that they've been able to do that consistently for, say, a week. And it's having those regular reviews, those regular celebrations, and also trying to make sure that we're all aware of that at every level. I think the other thing is about giving the voice to the young person, because it's about what is going to help them feel safe and secure. I can give you all sorts of ranges of experience and strategies that I've done for others, but actually for them, what is going to be the difference between them being able to cross that threshold or not? And I'm working with a young person at the moment who hasn't been in school, and we've done the home visits. So I've joined the attendance team, which again was interesting because I get to understand them. But then we've done a Teams meeting. We're then building up, so they come in and meet some other staff, because of course it's brilliant that they know me and trust me, but I'm not going to be their key worker. So who else can they obviously work with? And then you build it up to hook interests of what that might be. So this young person is really creative and loves art. Or get them in to do some art therapy, get them into to do anything that's creative, and it's slowly building them up so actually they can access what is a suitable timetable or provision for them. But it's mapping out what that would look like, because I think some of the issues are the unknown. So some of the young people, if they don't know what's about to happen, that's the biggest anxiety or the biggest worry. So it's just breaking it down into chunks. That's how I would approach it. I don't know if anybody else would have any other ways.
I want to jump into a little bit around the kind of the chat conversation as well, because I think there's some really important points there. So there's kind of a critique around the idea of emotional-based school avoidance as a term, and should we be using non-attendance? I'm not satisfied with any of them. I don't like the phrase school refusal. I absolutely know that. But I think there's bits there around actually we've got opportunities to jump in and support children before they stop attending. So emotional-based school avoidance is almost a catch-all that isn't particularly helpful, but also non-attendance. How about those children that are coming into school but are significantly challenged in doing so, that it's taken a huge amount of effort, or they come in one day, but actually they burn out and really, really struggle. So I think there's kind of little bits of conversation around actually, I think schools have a really important point. And one bit is actually, how do we rethink our attendance approaches? How do we shift from those kind of punitive responses to actually ones that are supportive and really thinking about what's driving children for feeling like they're unable to come to school? Is it about sensory issues? Is it about friendship groups? Is it about depression? Is it about anxiety? And are there things about actually how do we promote schools to have those low arousal spaces where they can support with their regulation of their emotions as well? But also, how do we uncover and find out those children that might be attending, but actually that is hugely stressful and difficult for them? So what interventions can we put in place for those children as well? And I think it's really has to be tailored about understanding what's going on for that child specifically. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about the chat, because I completely agree with you. I'm not happy with any of the terms. I don't know. And I think human nature is we want to categorize, but actually that doesn't really help us deal with what some complexities of the issues are.
I agree with you, Sarah. I think it is. I'll go back to, what Emma and you were saying. It's about relationships and individualized relationships with all of those children. And I think schools are really struggling at the moment because you've had a lot of things taken away from you, whereas, a few years ago, you might have a teaching assistant or more teaching assistants who could actually spot those early signs and maybe, help to generate some really sort of safe relationships, which aren't necessarily with teaching staff, but actually with school staff, which could foster them feeling safe and belonging in school. We haven't got that luxury so much anymore, have we, Emma? I mean, I remember when I first started teaching, we didn't have any teaching assistants, and then we had a teaching assistant, at least one in every class, and now they're gone again. So, and we also had nurture bases in every school, or a majority of the schools, and especially in the local authority that I worked in very early on in my teaching career, we had nurture bases. So that was a nice sort of space for young people who may have been struggling, but we didn't focus on, so much of the academic, but focused on, them feeling safe and well in school before the learning takes place. Because ultimately, if you don't feel safe, or you don't feel like you belong, or you feel out of place, you're not going to learn anyway. So you've got to get those building blocks in early doors, haven't you?
But as you were saying about early identification, so that's where, like, from a school perspective, we use obviously the early help assessment tool, and we try, as you said, capture them before they turn. So again, it's about knowing your students and looking for particular triggers and changes of behaviour. I think the difficulty is that is so personalised, and the young people that I've worked with are really good at masking, because that's a coping strategy, which again keeps them safe. So in some respects, that's really positive. But in others, it means that there's lots of young people, as you're saying, that go through the whole day and then just burn out and they're exhausted at the end. And it's just trying to make it so whether it's school, whether it's workplaces, are so inclusive, and then it's okay to be who you are and asking for help. I do think there's also a lot of work to do with parents and carers, and external agencies in terms of engagement, because again, if we can get in there early, you are more likely to be successful. I think when it comes to obviously young people that aren't able to access education for all different reasons, yes, there's some strategies, and yes, we've used the AV1 robots, which are fantastic, and they are life-changing for many people. However, again, it's sometimes limitations in terms of availability. It depends on your school culture. You almost have to have a universal offer for this area of need. Because when we're talking about SEN, there's obviously 4 areas of need. But actually, when it comes to social, emotional, mental health, it's trying to fit, where does this come in? And I think it's about education. So educating your staff, your parents, external agencies, what it looks like. And there isn't necessarily a criteria as such. But it's about trying to make sure that all education is accessible for all.
And I think there's another point, again, in chat about that kind of personalised response, about knowing that some of the challenges that children might have in their home environment. And the mention is about, actually those children that might want to stay at home because they have illness in their family. They might be young carers, for example. And I think we have to be clear about the emotional load that those young carers are taking. They might have significant anxiety about their family whilst at school, and that makes it hard to focus because you want to be somewhere else, and that makes sense, doesn't it? But also there might be practical barriers. So things like morning routines might be quite unpredictable for those children. They might be supporting siblings or their parents that have needs as well. And actually, if that child is then late and then punished for that lateness, when actually they're just trying to be a good child, then it can reinforce disengagement. So I think in terms of how schools might support those young carers, is actually thinking about your school policies and how you can approach flexibility. So what does staggered starts look like, for example? What does reducing homework to make sure that actually when they're at home, it really is about being with family? Is there a quiet space in school to kind of decompress and just be a child? But there's also bits about making sure, and anything that we say or we do, I'm sure everyone would agree, but feel free to disagree, is that if you don't have a child that has a trusted adult in the school environment, then whatever you try to do, what magic you try and kind of promote within your school environment is going to be lost. And those ideas around relational practice are really, really important.
And it's also making sure that you have those regular check-ins, and those check-ins can be from those trusted adults you said, and it's trying to make sure they don't just have one. It's trying to have like a circle of adults or trusted adults, because they need to know that actually at certain points some people are not available, and it's about who else can they reach out to. But I think it's also about emotional literacy. So again, can people try and communicate in a way that says, I'm not okay? And it's not always about finding the answers, but it's being able for the young people to have a common language where they can say, no, I do need help. Because a lot of the young people that I've worked with in secondary, when they have, say, social, emotional, mental health concerns, and it gets into a situation where they're vulnerable because they can't communicate actually how they're feeling, and sometimes that then comes out as physical aggression or not attending or shutting down, and then that's really hard to then piece it together. So as it all comes back to obviously knowing your learners, but also having policies that do have that adaptation. So does your behaviour and attendance policy have that adaptation in there? Is it that those teams work with the SEN team or the SENCO? And it's that SEN is obviously at every aspect of the school, because it's making sure that actually every young person's need is considered. And it's quite hard to be in an inclusive setting because of those barriers, but that's what we're striving to do. So it's again having those communication links for all stakeholders.
Amazing. I'm going to just jump in here. We've got great. Keep the comments coming. They're really helpful and in particular helpful to understand the context that you're in and where your school's at, because there's so much information and wealth of knowledge coming through. The Q&A function is open. I'm just going to come, we've got an anonymous question in. I'm just going to read it out for everyone. We saw an increase, and this is to you panelists, we saw an increase in emotionally based school avoidance immediately after the pandemic. And while it has improved somewhat since then, we have never got back to the good attendance rates we had before the pandemic. I think maybe a few schools will agree. It is almost as if some pupils realised, oh, but I don't have to attend school. There is no way to make me go. And it's this the lifetime habit, of attending has gone. We still see this lingering now. Is there any way to break through this pattern whilst also acknowledging there are many other different reasons for emotionally based school avoidance, such as SEND, being bullied, etc.?
I don't know if you agree with me, Emma, but I do think that some of this is also parental as well, because it's not just young people who think that they don't have to go to school. I think that there has been this universal, oh, well, they didn't have to go to school in COVID, so why do they have to go to school now? And I wonder whether there's something in that, although it is still the law, you send your child to school, I believe, unless the law's changed, unless I know, that doesn't seem to be, I don't know what the word is, doesn't seem to be like remembered anymore. And I think there's something about the parental expectation on young people that and schools that actually if they don't feel like they want to go today, and it's not, I'm not talking about those young people with a specific need, but again I'm talking about persistent absence with regard to systemic family issues where the family don't hold education in high regard, I think is what I'm saying, and I'm trying not to be offensive. And that comes into this persistent absence, and that's again a bigger cost, bigger conversation. But I do think post-COVID there has been less of an emphasis with some families on the importance of attending school, routines, being school ready. We've got lots of being school ready and teachers, having in early years about cleaning children's teeth and teaching them how to clean teeth. So it's a bigger sort of a bigger issue, in my opinion. That's just my four penneth worth. Anyone want to jump in there?
Some people talk about the contract, don't they, between schools and parents being kind of broken. And I think we did spend a long time during COVID to say, actually keep your child at home. But I also think it's shifted away our perspectives. So, as a mum myself, it would be, you'd have to be particularly poorly to not go to school prior to COVID. Whereas now I feel more of responsibility. Well, I don't want you to make other people ill. I don't know what the right answer there is. There's probably a balance somewhere, but you can see how parents would kind of shift their thinking as well for lots of different reasons.
I think it's also about expectations and the fact that all of in terms of secondary anyway, it's about making sure that our young people are ready for adulthood and prepared for adulthood and the workplace. And I think it's again that parent communication interaction. I know that it's really difficult when it comes to local authorities in terms of they obviously have a criteria for attendance, but when it comes to anything regarding SEN, people are less likely to follow those normal processes and practices because, again, it's really difficult to work out, is it a SEND reason for absence or actually is it casual absence, for example, which I know sounds awful, but it's more trying to work out what it is. I think in terms of schools, we're trying to work as hard as possible with the attendance team because every lesson missed is a missed opportunity to obviously close that gap. And when you're coming into school and you've not been able to attend school for a long time, that that puts a lot of anxiety on people, because you don't know what's going to happen in that French class or that assembly. You don't know what that routine looks like. So it's not even just about exams and education. It's about preparing them for the workplace or whatever that happens to be. And I think it's that we need to work on. So as you said, I don't necessarily like the term school-based avoidance, but in terms of those type of young people at the moment, it's trying to work out what are their next steps. How do you make sure they're prepared for the world of adulthood? Because whilst there are support systems out there, actually as you become an adult, there are less support technically. So it's how you put those building blocks and scaffolding to support them for their next steps. And that, in terms of SEN and SENCO, that role, I think that is really important for me. Yes, I need their literacy and numeracy, because that helps them get to their next step in terms of opening doors, but I need them to be able to function as effective citizens.
And be able to understand the strategies and tools that's going to help them moving forward, like you're saying, Emma, because ultimately, if you are struggling, you may always struggle. So if you can if you can learn some strategies and tools to help you struggle less, or at least accept the struggle, or find ways to move forward in society as you get older, schools are very well placed to offer that support. And that will always be a helpful thing. But if you can't get to school in the first place, or you can't get to your professionals or your wider support network because of certain things, then that's not going to help you in the long run. So and I was sort of picking up on what you're saying, Emma, about education. Yes, education and learning and GCSEs, very, very important. I just want to go right back to what I said earlier. Unless anybody feels safe or is actually attending, they're not even going to be able to access that. And we know for young people who have, are unable to attend school for whatever reason, it's not really math. Close your ears, Emma. It's not really maths they're missing. It really isn't. It is that whole school culture. It is their friends. It is relationship building. It's the learning of those strategies that they might not even know they're learning, but they're just picking them up. And by osmosis, you're learning to become a member of a mini society, aren't you? And it's all of those things. And the longer they're off, the more of those things become sort of a massive in their heads, and massive barriers and boundaries, and it just gets harder and harder to reintegrate, because you've missed that in joke that happened last Tuesday, or you've missed having lunch with your friends and what flavor sandwiches somebody didn't like. It's those teeny tiny things that build the sort of emotional safety and the emotional stability and the relationships in school, that then lead to the fact that you can access maths, you can access geography, you are in a space to learn.
No, definitely. And I think, as you said before, it's about making sure that they are emotionally safe. And we've obviously used the AV1 robots, as we've talked about previously, but they have been brilliant and life-changing for some of our young people, because it's about making sure that, yes, they go to those lessons, as you're saying, but the AV1 robots can go to any aspect of the school day. So I've used them in form time, in assembly, break times. They can go on trips and enrichment activities. And the purpose of them, yes, it's to get in front of specialist teachers, but it's also about making sure that they do have those opportunities to interact, because actually, when you think about it, every interaction can be an intervention. And I know that's a bit of a corny quote, but actually it may be that teacher welcoming that person into the room or into the lesson. That may be the one thing that hooks them and then keeps them feeling safe all day. And it's the same if they're sat within the lesson. It's the same if they know what's going on in terms of their work. I think it's a really, really important tool that can be used to make sure those young people continue to attend the lessons. You can see a picture of an AV1 robot, and they are very cute. I think they're brilliant. But actually, for a lot of young people that we've used them for, it could be for medical, it could be for school-based avoidance. But it just means that these young people have access to that community, and belonging to a community is so powerful. And actually, whilst it won't necessarily solve all the problems, it will mean that they have opportunities to engage, to be checked in, to obviously have opportunity to learn. And some of the young people that I've worked with, it means the difference between attending or being part of a school community or not. And so I can't praise them enough. I think they're brilliant assistive technology. And the staff that have been using them as well, again, there's always some unsettlement at the start because it's new. But once you get it embedded within your school, it is part of your provision, and the teachers are engaging with it. And you can move it around the classroom. It can be involved in practicals. They can speak through it. It is epic, and I've been really impressed with it. And of course, I've used it for all different learners. And for some people, it doesn't work because, again, it's their level of need. But for the ones that I've used it for, it's been life-changing.
Thanks, Emma. I'm just going to jump in here. We naturally went onto the AV1, and I realised we kind of all know about AV1, and it was the thing that got me so excited about doing training around this, that actually this even exists. I remember Rachel showing me the fact that the robot blinks, that it can actually interact. But what really got me was that we're surrounded by tech. We see new tech come day in, day out. We see the thing that got me was the stories of the students that tell how they didn't miss. It's beautiful. Simone, you saw how many reactions were coming through where you talk about, it's not about the maths, it's not about the science, which pains me. I used to be a science teacher, but it's really not, right? It's about those interactions you have. It's why we all, as adults, remember that one time we went on a trip to the middle of Wales and we're freezing and it was raining. But, it's those things. And as teachers, we know it's where we get those conversations, and this allows that to happen in a beautiful way where, you're right, it might not be for every child, but now, rather than watching a recording back, they can actually be there, they can answer live, they can actually feel that they're there. And I just wanted to use this moment to talk about if there's any specific case studies. Simone, you might be able to jump in, Sarah, as well, but Emma, specific case studies of students where this has worked for them and what's been their kind of feedback, and how, because I imagine when you first put it into a class, can disrupt the class to start with, but then how does that integration happen?
Emma, do you want to talk about how it worked in your school? Because I have millions of case studies, Ed. So unless you've got about the next 3 days, I could speak forever. But Emma, do you want to talk about the classroom effect first?
Yeah, no, definitely. So again, like with any initiative or provision, it's about how you communicate. So before they, because I had a fleet of 6 that were part of our school provision, and before we'd even release them into the classrooms, it's about the background work. So it's making sure that obviously you've spoken to teachers, you've shown them, you've given them the opportunity to come and have a look at them and have a play with them, because it's really cool. Like you're saying, you can change emotions, you can speak through it, you can change the top of their heads for different answers. So it's brilliant. Of course, at first, the teachers are intrigued by it because they're like, what does it mean? But there's loads of safeguarding bits on there in terms of making sure it's locked down, all that kind of jazz. So it is safe to be within classrooms. And then once the teachers have obviously seen it, it's about making sure the students do. So I did an assembly for every student within the school, and again, introduce them, explained what they are, what they're doing. And of course, when it first goes into the classroom, there is a bit of buzz. They want to obviously talk to it. They want to see what it is, because it is cool. It's a piece of technology, and the young people are so much better at technology than me. So they were really interested in it. But once the hype had settled down and you get into the normal lessons, because for my young people, it was going to all lessons at that point. They get into a routine, and some young people did speak through it. And actually were engaging and were turning the head and involved in practicals and discussions and all that kind of thing. And then other young people, particularly the ones with school-based avoidance, who just weren't sure to start off with, they were just there. And we'd turn the top of the head blue, and it just meant that actually we're here, but don't talk to me, for example. So again, like any provision, you'd have it personalised to the young person. Staff are aware of what that meant. They knew that some of them they spoke to, some they didn't. They could move it around the classroom. And actually, it's about renewing it and reviewing it every, say, 6 weeks to make sure the provision is correct. Some young people did it at home and were on their iPad in the lesson. And then slowly the plan is always to reintegrate them back into school so they can still do it in a safe place within school. Because, again, it's about trying to get them back into the community slowly. I had one young person that was medical, so she would often do it from home or her hospital bed, but it meant that her live streams were like daily and she was on it. And it meant that actually she's just finished her PPs for year 11s and she is going to sit her GCSEs, which is epic, because if she hadn't had that assisted technology, she wouldn't actually be attempting her GCSEs. And she's a really intelligent girl. She was just so poorly. So for her, we're all incredibly proud. I've got another young person who was classed as an EBSA student, hadn't really engaged in school at all. And we used it for form time and for breaks, and then slowly built it up into lessons. Because again, it's trying to connect with those people. She again, sometimes she did it at school, sometimes she did it at home, but she was then coming in for mornings, and that's where we're at the moment. She was coming in for mornings and doing the morning sessions in school, traveling home in between breaks, so of course, so she's not with the crowds, and then logging on for the afternoon at home. And again, it was fantastic. You can obviously build the personalisation around it, but it is about how you get your staff on board, how you let your parents know. And we sent out a letter. We invite people in to come and have a look at it. It is epic, but it does need to be planned carefully. I could talk to you all day about it. I'm very excited.
Thanks, Emma. You're absolutely right. It does need to be plan very carefully, and you do need to have the buy-in from everybody. Otherwise, it won't work. It's not for everybody, as Emma said, but if you've got the buy-in and it's the right family and the right child, it will work. However, you can be part of a bigger package around, the things that a young person might need. So, for example, using it alongside, just as an example, when I was in my local authority, I had a fleet of 50 that were part of my medical offer to schools. I know I'm beating you, Emma. I just had to get that in there. In fact, it was actually 52 for a year.
It was funding, but only have 6.
And where we could use them in a very straightforward way for chronic illness, that made more sense. But when we had young people who had maybe been off school for anxiety for maybe quite a significant amount of time, we'd have to put the package around it. So we might start with giving them a physical tutor to build that relationship with, because they may not think that they've got those relationships at schools anymore because they've been off of school for such a long time. So actually giving them a person outside of the school environment that they can bond with, and then they can start to make their relationships with the school staff, with their tutor, to keep them grounded and make them feel safe because they've still got their person, then start to dial in maybe using the AV1. And also, having a reduced timetable in place so that the expectation is that they might dial into some lessons, they might go into some lessons with maybe their tutor or maybe a trusted member of staff. There's all sorts of ways to support young people back into school when they're missing education. Some excellent alternative provisions out there as well. Online tutoring, if it's not possible. It's about having a look at everything that's about there. And again, it's right back to the right tool, the right prevention, the right package for each student where possible, I would say. Sarah, any thoughts?
Just before I'm going to bring no, you're all right. I'm going to bring Sarah in. I just wanted to say it's absolutely amazing, as you said. There are so many things there. There's case studies Rachel's put in the chat that you can click on as well. But I'm going to be that person. I'm going to be like, there might be a teacher that'd be like, well, we don't have an AV1, we don't have the money for one or whatever. What is there? What are the top tricks? And we've already said, there's so many other things to be doing. And Sarah, I know you've got some other bits and pieces that can be accessed as well. So I'm going to pass over to you.
I've just shared, so I hope that people can see. This is not a hard sell, by the way, because this is all free. If you go onto my website, I've got loads of different resources, and part of these resources you might want to see is early intervention as well. So, for example, we know that some children might struggle with going to school if they've had several transitions. So I've got welcome to school packs that I've translated, not me personally, that I've translated into different languages. Things about children moving from year 6 into year 7. And it kind of carries on about bereavement, relationships, and so on. But one that's particularly relevant, I think, for this setting is the emotional-based school avoidance one. And I want to start with the idea of thinking about psychosocial education. So getting children and their parents and their staff around them, youth workers and so on, to think about what are maybe some of the challenges. So you can download this for free. And the idea is that it explores some different things. Now, it has got things like the AV1 on there, but it also have things like, real kind of basic things about what does a soft landing look like for a child coming into school if they've come from a stressful environment. It gives you about creating a personal plan together. Things like a school journey roadmap, and I'm going to add to this soon as well. I had a really great talk with Kelly Hannigan, who talked about the idea of thinking about your kind of bird view journey into school, because it's not always schools that might be presenting the issue. It might be the journey into school. It might be having to walk past lots of people when it's really, really busy. So getting that almost aerial map, or get the young person to draw it and go, actually, what feels really anxiety provoking, and get them to put a red sticker on it. Where do you feel safe and comfortable within the school? Green sticker. Where are you not sure? And then what can you do about that? So things about the school journey roadmap can be quite helpful as well. But I'm also going to add to this and have that aerial map. But also, again, that psychosocial element about actually how do you listen to your body? You do have a tummy ache, but what does that actually mean for you? What's going on in terms of anxiety? And so things like Likert scales as well. So please feel free to take this. It's packed with different ideas and approaches and little case studies about a girl called Esme and so on. So yeah, please use it in any way that you feel fit. But I think a lot of it is around also framing the conversations. What can you do? What are you doing really well? Actually, you've told me you're finding things difficult. That's amazing. So that's just kind of one of my approaches as well, having those conversations and trying to build up children developing their own plans to support reintegration too.
Amazing. And Simone and Emma, I want to also build on what Sarah's said there. And Sarah, if you want to chuck that link into the chat and people will be able to access that now. What are the other kind of immediate things that people can do? And I've kept saying in the chat, please do ask questions. If you've got a specific scenario that you want some advice on, you can anonymize it. Now's the time to ask. But someone might be also, I'm aware that some teachers on this might also be really new to their role in this space, and what can they do to, we've talked about the individualization, we've talked about some of the tips and tricks and helping students, but are there any other things that you think, I need to get this out and tell people that this has worked for us?
I think it's just the parent or carer communication, and that's not to cost anything. We've talked about things that potentially would have a cost to it. But if you can have key workers that are consistently communicating with carers and parents and the young people if they're not in school, because again, it's having that connection. I think that's key. And then I have used, as I said, early help assessments. They cost in terms of time, but they don't cost anything. But that's obviously trying to make sure that you're looking at not just education, but looking at if there's anything at the home that they could obviously be supporting with. And it is that regular 6 to 8 week meeting slot. So again, there's always that connectivity, because one of the biggest issues, I think, is if you don't have that communication, it's so easily to lose it, and also the young person feels forgotten. So again, it's really hard to get them in. We use pupil passports, so some people might call them one-page profiles, but again, even if they're not in school, you need to find ways of doing that. So I do twilight sessions, so young people come and meet me in a quiet environment. We normally do some colouring because I like colouring and doodling, but they come and I can talk to anyone, as you probably guessed, but I will talk to them so they don't have to talk, so I can fill that silence for them. We do some doodling, I get to know them, so then you build up your pupil passport for that. So when they eventually come into school, at least we know something about them. And again, once you've done those kind of things, I often find that those young people we have no information on at all. So if they can do some of those sessions with me or my team, we can then look at doing some assessments. So again, whether it's reading age, spelling age, is there a reason why they're not coming? Now, sometimes there's not, but actually that's further information that if there's ever a referral to the local authority for a request for statutory assessment, at least I've got some data. And I think that's quite good. And again, it gets them back into doing some structured, whether it's assessments or education. So sometimes they come and write me a piece as well, so I can look at their handwriting, see how they obviously sit and do it, all those kind of things. And again, it's just that phasing back in. They need to have, like, this week I'm going to go and see Mrs. Gopher, and we're going to do a quiz. I call them a quiz for them, but a quiz. Next week I'm going to go in for the morning and speak to someone in our STEM provision hub. The following week I might try and attend a lesson. Now that's obviously extreme, but it needs to be a planned, and they need to know that it's going to happen. And they need to be part of that. So what do they feel? Is it that they can go into that art lesson, as I said before? Is it that they have a member of staff they just want to go and see? So it's not even about lessons. Is it that they can go and see them in a tutor time? And again, make those connections. You need to have staff to do that, and it's about staff training, because as a Senko or a lead within school, I can't do that for every child. So I have to make sure that my team are prepared. But it should be the same diet going forward. So my teaching assistants or inclusion assistants should be able to do that role, because obviously I've trained them to do it, because then you can impact a wider range of people. And actually, if I work with them and it's not working, I can bring someone else in, because that fresh face sometimes is really important. There's loads you can do. It just depends on the situation and what resources, but you have to be creative and put that young person at the centre. What is it that's going to hook them? I sometimes send them a little email before I work with them, again with a lovely picture of myself, and then about my needs as being well, all sorts of things, but neurodivergent, and then actually something that I like, and I normally find out what they like as well. So one young person I'm talking with at the moment loves Lego, so talk a little bit of a paragraph about Lego, and then I'll ask them a question about it, and they generally respond back. And again, it's just that regular connection.
I think it's about flexibility, like you're saying, Emma, about having those creative ways, and thinking about what you were saying about going in twilight, being, school being open and flexible enough to say, look, when you've been off for a while or what have you, the school building hasn't changed, but actually bringing you into the busy school day is going to be too much. So maybe, do you want to pop in at like when everyone's gone, and then we can just have a little quiet walk around the school, or you can just go to a room that you feel safe in. So sort of picking up from what you were saying, Emma, it's about having those creative ways of kind of tuning in to what the young person needs and what they like. And I think it's very easy to remember that an intervention or something is not a magic wand, and it's not going to work tomorrow. It's not. It's going to have very small, tiny steps of progress. And it's remembering that 5 minutes today is 100% better than nothing yesterday. And I get it. I'm a teacher. I get that, we all want the best for the young people. We want them to be there. We want them to get their outcomes and succeed and all of those things. But actually, if you've done 5 minutes with Emma today and you didn't do any with Emma yesterday, that's such a success for that young person. I mean, it would be successful for me if I had 5 minutes with Emma. But it is about sort of really, really thinking about what's progress, what's impactful, what's successful on a very, very sort of micro level.
It's seeing it as a ladder, isn't it? That often you kind of look at the approach that actually just going in school all of a sudden is going to be too much. So what are those steps on the ladder for that child? And actually, what is their goal for that? And how do you break it down? And I think there's that phrase, isn't there, of how do you eat an elephant? Well, one bite at a time. I think we have to be kind to children to unwind some of the difficulties, and we do want children to feel safe. And I think if they're not attending school, they're telling us quite clearly they don't feel safe in that school environment, or there is something pulling them back home. So I think it's about unraveling those kind of push and pull factors as well in more detail and stepping up for them. And I think also it's that acknowledgement that not everything is a smooth line. You're not just going to climb that ladder and it be completely easy. Actually, you're going to misstep at points. You're going to fall backward, but that's okay. We've got you and we'll keep on supporting you. So that kind of unconditional regard, because I suspect that those children already feel incredibly bad about themselves. So how do we build them up and support them going up that ladder?
And I was going to come on to that in terms of empathy. So obviously, one of the things that I do use as a bit of a superpower, I'm not going to lie, is my neurodiversity. And I do communicate that probably more. I do it more so than if I worked in a different environment, then I wouldn't necessarily talk about it. But I think when I'm working with, whether it's families or young people or even teachers, to be honest with you, it's about awareness, empathy, and saying, look, I struggle with dyslexia. I struggle with that, but that doesn't mean that I cannot achieve. I'm a teacher. I've got masters. I've got many qualifications in terms of sense. What it means is I have to come around it a different way. But actually, when you express them the challenges that you have daily, you build again another connection. Yes, I get that you struggle to reading. Yes, I get that's a challenge. How are we going to move around it? And it's that personal connection that generally gets them on board. Now, we laugh about me talking, but actually, if I can try and make them laugh, if I can make a connection with them, if there's something about, as I said, Lego or car, it's normally cars as well, or something that we can talk about, it doesn't have to be about school. It doesn't have to be about education, because that's scary. Let's stay away from that to start off with. Let's talk about something that they do know, they've got the literacy for, that they can actually feel comfortable, because it's not necessarily about them. Because often when they come and see the Senko or leaders, it's about them and what they have or haven't done. Let's take that away and actually say, can you talk to me about the book that you're reading or the supercar that you like? And actually that then kind of opens up, and then they remember that, and they remember that you are a person trying to help them. And I think that's powerful. Yes, it takes time. Yes, you have to plan it. After school is always a winner for me. It's, as you said, it's quiet. It's quite, if you come around the school at the moment, it's really, really quiet. There's lots of time. I've got more flexibility. Whereas in a school day, I'm here, there and everywhere. So actually, they're getting more of me and better value. So for many respects, I think that's good. I think one of the things in the chat about policies is interesting as well, because actually, I've always been one of these people that if I see a policy that either I don't understand or doesn't work, it's about influencing, isn't it? So who within the school or whoever it happens to be, you need to go and talk to them, tell them your frustrations or restrictions, and take a solution with you and try and work out actually that's obviously a policy, say within a trust, but actually with our young people here, this is what needs to work, because you have to influence those leaders and get them on side and say, right, I want to be part of the next pilot to look at this policy, to renew it, to actually put in what it means for our young people. Because yes, there's loads of policies and frameworks that we have to use, but we have to adapt it for our young people. And that's not just within schools, that's in all sorts of work life as well. But you have to be part of the conversation, and just because you're challenging it doesn't mean that it has to be conflict. You're challenging it to make it better and make it work for your young people and your staff. So I'd always go and speak to the person you need to, and it's normally the head or the principal or the governors, but I'd definitely get in there and challenge it.
Amazing. Thank you, Emma, for that, and for picking that up in the chat as well. We're almost at time. We've got time for one more question. There's just been so many things that have been said, so many tips, so many tricks. It's obviously something we're kind of struggling with in education massively. But the things that I've been hearing are a lot around personalization, using empathy, like sharing, being vulnerable ourselves. And I think when we model behavior and we model this level of vulnerability, it unlocks something in young people where they go, well, hang on, what, you get sad too? And then, yeah, and you start to have conversations, but it is also a time thing as well. We've got a question I want to come to, and I want to kind of gather each of your answers on this, because I think, again, this is quite a timely question. It's from Paula. How do we get the messages across to some of our parents and carers about the importance of the social and the future readiness elements of school, as well as the academic progress? Like, how do we do that? Because that is the future of education as well, as it's not just great tick box, you've got your grades. Companies, I don't know if anyone's seen this, but the World Economic Forum, for example, they release a future jobs report. They released it in January for 2025. A third, 33% of core worker skills in the UK are going to change by 2030. That means a lot of kids that even just started primary school won't have left primary school by the time a third of job skills have changed. So it is about this social and future readiness. How can we get these messages across to parents and carers about the importance of coming to school for those elements?
I'm always a fan of a coffee morning. I'm not going to lie to you. So again, anything that you can engage with the parents, carers and external agencies. So when it comes to, I've just actually arranged a coffee morning for my school, and we've invited different organisations. So we happen to invite the local parent forum and also SENIAS, because I think that's important. And I think it's trying to make sure that you drip that message through. So of course it has to come onto policies, as we were just saying a minute ago. So it has to be on your policies and on your websites. I think you have to obviously get the parents in. So get the parents and carers in for a coffee morning, whether it's obviously having your parents' evenings. Again, it's trying to get as many different coordinated responses. But it's also about things like work experience. So it's trying to, yes, schools do work experience, but get the parents in, whether it's a webinar, whether it's a coffee morning, and actually explain the importance that it isn't just about sitting your GCSEs, it's actually what happens. So it's making sure that you have a preparing for adulthood framework and structure. And again, that's not just within the SEND team, that's a whole across the whole school. So what are they all doing? It's having a good careers lead. So again, making sure that there's lots of parent, carer and external agencies and engagements, and that could be anything. But it's about making sure that they all have targets. So when you're meeting with your young people, what is it? The conversation is, what is it you want to do after school? Because then you're almost building it backwards, aren't you? And again, it's having those conversations with the parents and carers, I'd say. Anything else?
I think it's having the same message. Sorry, Sarah. I agree with Emma, and having that's the school message. That's not just the SEM message. It's not just careers message. It's a school message that education is bigger than just the subjects, and that's something I'm very, very clear on.
I think for me, it's about kind of appreciating that some parents and carers themselves might have had poor experiences of school, or perhaps don't value it in lots of different ways. So how do we make sure that we welcome our community in and know that we're all trying to have the same value of supporting their child to do the best that they can be? So I think it's about tapping into that community response. And I think it's also about, we all like to hear when our child is doing well. How often do we ring up when they're doing wrong or doing poorly compared to how they're doing well? So I think it's trying to kind of have those lines of communication open before there's any issues or anything like that. So you're on the kind of same page. And I think that involves the things like coffee mornings, but it's also about the kind of real kind of simple things about waving, saying hello. Oh, I really like the way that your child did X, Y, Z. And I think early years, nursery, primary, probably do that incredibly well. It's more challenging. You've got to do it more kind of explicitly in secondary school, generally speaking, because of the way that they are shaped. But also, if you're asking parents to come into your school, think about what that environment looks like. Is it welcoming? And one of the schools that I went to in Worcester, in England, was actually you don't go past the door unless you're offered a cup of tea. And as someone who loves tea, that matters to me. But actually, the idea, it doesn't matter if you're a parent or professional, it's really thinking about the hierarchy of that school environment as well. So I think some of those kind of very practical steps can be done, but also thinking about the way that you are communicating with parents and carers. Are you showing empathy, caring, considerate kind of approach? Because actually, schools could be scary places for lots of different reasons, not just for the children, but also for the grown-ups around them supporting them.
And I'd just like to sort of bring up on that point, when I was a head teacher of an alternative provision, we would ring the parents almost daily for our young people just to say they've smashed it today. Not anything specific, and the amount of parents that I had crying on the phone saying, I've never had that phone call. It's just a very easy thing. It's not an easy thing in a big secondary school. I'm not saying it is, but actually, that does, does pay dividends. It really does.
I was just going to say very quickly that it's also about praise points. So it's about reward systems. As you said, we can't actually ring everyone every single day. I get that, but we need to increase our communication. But we often give our praise points for values. So we have 3 values within the school. And again, it's recognising those 3 values all the time. And they're not linked to education as such. Like one of them is kindness, for example. And we forever go around saying that was really kind and signposting it. Again, with the staff, the students and the parents.
Amazing. What a session. It's gone by so quickly. I'm sure we could continue to keep chatting. And I'm just quickly, hopefully, on my screen in a second, you will see this phrase that we use. We're building the empathy generation. Hopefully you can see my screen. Can you? Is it coming up? Yeah, perfect. And this is a generation of like understanding, but we talk about making the younger generation the empathy generation, but we also need to be part of that empathy generation. We need to be practicing and using empathy and using it to understand what our students need. And I just want to quickly move on to this as I'm feeding back. I've just put a link in the chat to just a feedback survey just to help us. It's really quickly. There's optional comments, but there's some quick ratings. It helps us make sure we are delivering things that you need. We also just really nice to know your feedback. We're over time slightly, but just to say a massive thank you, Simone, Emma, Sarah, for your time, your expertise after a long, busy day to come on and just give us gems, ideas, snippets, tips, tools, tricks. We will be sending a follow-up email to this with some links from No Isolation as well. Rachel, thank you for being on the back end as well and helping comment. And thank you for all being here and being part of this. And yeah, let's keep the conversation going and keep talking and sharing about it. And thank you, obviously, to No Isolation, who have been our partner throughout Empathy Week and partnered for this session as well. Thank you, everyone, for coming. The survey will be open for a while. The link's in the chat. Have a good rest of your day, and we'll see you all soon. Thank you very much. Bye, everyone.